one thing that I notice is customers that have just a very well-defined need. If they can say, here's what I've been doing in Excel, it's taking me and my people so much time. I know we can build a program for this. That's like my perfect customer because it's something that they're doing by hand that they don't want to be doing by hand anymore.
Welcome to SaaS That App, building B2B web applications, the podcast where we share real-world stories, practical advice, and tech insights for those building or thinking about starting a tech-enabled business. I'm your co-host, Aaron Marchbanks.
And I'm Justin Edwards. Each week we bring you the stories, strategies, and insights you need to build your SaaS or tech-enabled business smarter, not harder. Let's dive right in. Hey, welcome to SaaS That App. As always, I'm joined by my witty, bearded, and much better spoken co-host, Aaron Marchbanks. How are you doing today, Aaron?
Doing well, thanks, Justin.
Hey, today we're joined by a guy from my old stomping grounds. Brian Stinar did his computer science work at New Mexico Tech and his master's at my alma mater, UNM. After brief experience with employment, Brian started Noventum Custom Software, where he's been working on a wide variety of problems for a wide variety of businesses for like over 12 years now. So super excited to learn a bit about what you've been up to since I left the tech scene in the land of enchantment. And welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Justin. I'm happy to be here. So things are going pretty well. How about you guys? You having a good day?
Yeah, not too bad for not Monday. Mondays are always super meeting heavy. We talked about that, but yeah, Tuesdays on are usually pretty fun. I actually get stuff done.
No, never better. We're hitting nice weather here. It's like not super, super hot yet. We're like low 80s. So it's a nice time to be on the beach here. So cool. Well, you want to give us just a little bit, like introduce folks to who you are, give a little bit of your background and your story. I tried to intro it for you a little bit, but yeah.
So we do a lot of Django app development. That's like our core. We're probably about 80%. Well, we are about 80% software engineering, mostly in Django. We have a Java Spring, not Spring Boot application, a legacy Java Spring app that we maintain. That's our second big one. And then a lot of random stuff. We do a lot of PHP. Other than the 80% software engineering, about 20% of what we do would be basic marketing sites, WordPress stand-ups, WordPress build-outs. We've developed that pretty well because, we're not a design company. We're a bunch of engineers. So getting something that looks good, that we go through with our design process, that the different designers present to the client can see. And then once it gets done with that, the implementation's easy. WordPress is not a difficult environment to work in if you're used to MVC types of PHP frameworks or Python frameworks. It's not bad. Probably the worst thing is just all the legacy API calls that you can't really mess with. So
awesome. So on the Django front, are you using like DRF with a front end application, or are you mostly like core Django, or how does that work?
Yeah. So most of the time what we do is every single page load and every single entity is like, it's making a query. So it's just the stock Django, which for the vast majority of our clients is fast enough. If we get a really big listing screen that has to move a lot of data, we'll create API calls for that and then load it up with data tables using either pagination or some other mechanism. But the vast majority of our applications aren't so busy that page refresh on everything is like a killer. And just, being able to go monolithic and just crank through stuff like that means it's really, really easy. We have had a couple of clients that have used Flask or Django backend, and then we create the API calls. So it's like maybe the admins are using Django and then all the users are using like React or something like that on the front end. So it can go a lot faster, but the additional build out associated with that is usually not worth it until the application is pretty successful. It's the same idea with building out an Android app, an iOS app, a web app, and then having a backend to manage them all. Unless somebody is either, backed by a lot of VC money or they just want to build it, like I almost always prefer, let's build the web app, let's work through all those problems, and then we can add that stuff as needed.
We get a lot of shade because we're primarily a Ruby on Rails shop company. That's where I normally stick people is into Ruby on Rails. And there's been a lot of speculation about whether or not, Rails is relevant, and everyone wants to do kind of this hot new thing. But for small businesses and those types of business customers we work with who are trying to solve a real problem for real people, same thing. Monolithic Rails app is just very often the right case. So
yeah, we see that with one of our clients that I'll try not to name. They have the Java backend, and then they have a really old framework. It's like backbone.js. It was like pre-React, pre anything. And so they've got this front end framework, and then it's talking to an Elasticsearch like cache. So it's got a MongoDB document store that could be used by a front end in read-only mode or in replication mode. But for some reason, they added Elasticsearch, and then everything's querying the Elasticsearch front end. And it kind of makes sense to have the web do it because those guys are busy. They're getting 1 million hits a day. They're busy enough that that would kind of make sense for the web. But for everything else, it's just all mixed together. I just call it resume-driven development. You're like, how many cool, modern, new things can I throw in here to make this so that my next job is way more fun? And you're like, what is this? So inheriting one of those is like not my favorite thing in the world.
Well, how did you, just curious, in terms of consultancy, a lot of times you have to make decisions, you have to make calls or forks in the road as you're moving along. Did you pick like Django and WordPress as the horses to ride, or did they kind of fall in your lap and you built expertise around them? How did you get there?
Well, I mean, I would say both of those, we actually have different answers, right? So WordPress, it just fell in my lap. People that need help with marketing sites, it's a good choice. There's so many ways that people can get going with WordPress pretty quickly. It's like 60% of the internet now in terms of number of sites. It's huge. So it's just this giant ecosystem. And like I had WordPress clients before I even knew WordPress, right? Because they needed help and they knew that I could figure it out. Because they could throw random tech stuff at me and I would figure it out when it was just me. So WordPress did just fall in my lap. For Django, no. I mean, we had built apps, when I started meeting Justin, we were doing a lot of Cake PHP, Zen PHP, a lot of these PHP frameworks. I'd done a little bit of Java web app development. I'd done these different things, but like individually, like my Python used to be strong. Like I was good at Python, and like I'd always come up with these Python programs to help people to do like small tasks. Like Python's a good glue. And when it came time to build a new web application from the ground up, one of my developers, because at that time I had hired people, he had enough Python proficiency from these random Python glue projects that he picked Django because it had a lot of modules. It had a lot of the benefits that WordPress has, where you have, 4 different OAuth modules that you can choose from. You have 6 different, data tables like front ends for presenting tabular data, like all these different packages that you can just select and use in the open source ecosystem that make it really easy. So we chose Django based upon a Python proficiency. And I'm not good at Django. I think I did 1 Django commit because by the time we started making those choices, I had been doing less and less programming and more podcast interview, sales, management. Did you remember to fill out your timesheet type of work?
That's why we got our computer science degrees, so we can
ask
people
and why we use
fill out their timesheets.
Yeah, and we use content management systems so the clients can pay us to manage their content, right?
Well, cool. I know that you kind of have been a New Mexico-based dude and a New Mexico-based firm, kind of like since inception. I know you're with New Mexico Tech Council, and I think we met at 1 Million Cups. There at Fat Pipe 1 million years ago in Albuquerque, but. Yeah, I guess how has like the New Mexico tech ecosystem changed in the last like 5 or 6 years? And like are your clients primarily New Mexican? Are your developers primarily New Mexican?
So, 5 years ago, the answer used to be yes, that everything was mostly based here, but that's no longer the case. We have a big client called, Geeks Who Drink that do pub quizzes across the whole country, and they had international quizzes. They're everywhere. So, mainly they're based out of Denver. That's where most of my contacts are. We have another essential oils wholesale retail client that used to be based in Santa Fe, but she moved to Tucson. And our number 3 is a company that's headquartered in Texas, but incorporated in Delaware, and they have people all over the place. Grants that just pay them for anything. So they're happy to work at extremely low rates. And, after 8 weeks of training, it's not the same as a 4-year degree or 4+2 with a master's or 10+ for a PhD. So those rates can be lower. The work, it can be good and it can be bad because, if we inherit a site that they mess up, the requirements are very clear. The customer knows what they need. They've gone through all this work to figure out what they have to do, and it's just the person that has 8 weeks worth of training can't do it. So from that perspective, it's good. It can be bad because you used to just be able to hold out your hands and collect the money. It would rain down. So you have to work a little bit more. So a lot of changes, but I mean those tend to be I think overall good changes as long as you can adapt and adjust. So
yeah, I think the bootcamp thing is interesting. I think in as much as it's helped people who didn't have access to get into tech, I think that's an awesome thing. And I've seen bootcamp people who went on to be successful. Our favorite developer, he's my best friend, so I'm biased, but I've been working with this guy for 10 years, more than 10 years. And yeah, I don't think ever finished his formal degree. So, but he's a way better programmer than I am. He's a crazy hacker and he doesn't have that credential. So I'm not hung up on the credentials. I just find that if he had gotten his start and exposure through a boot camp, he would still be amazing. And if he got it through a computer science program, he would still be amazing. So I think that's interesting. But I do remember, especially with like New Mexico local government stuff, there was a lot of, I don't know if there still is, but there was a lot of boot camp related people and activity.
I mean, I think one of the best guys, he said, "Hey, Brian, let me take you out to lunch. I just graduated my boot camp and I want to pick your brain because you're at a good place." And I said, "Sure, Elliot, I'll pay though, because you just graduated and, you don't have to pay for my lunch, but I appreciate it."
Very nice of you.
Yeah. And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Elliot, you have your degree, you're doing great, but don't let this stop you, right? The boot camp shouldn't be the end. You see all these possibilities. Like, don't stop learning, don't stop growing. If you can get a scholarship to pay for a master's in computer science, take it. You can get an internship at these places and make good money. Just keep going, keep learning." And, he ended up renting an apartment from me because he was like, "Oh, you have any apartments that are available?" And working on his master's degree. And, the guy got his master's and he's making a ton of cash now for some company. So like, as long as it's like the first step, like anybody that stops learning, like, I don't care if it's from a boot camp or a CS program, if you stop learning, like, it's obvious. You can just see the technology where somebody ossified and they're like done, right? And like, "Oh, I'm not learning anymore. I've been doing this for 10 years. It's good enough for me." And you're like, that is a bad approach, right? And I think the way that the boot camps are sold, it's like, "Oh, take this camp, get a great job." And then that's kind of the end, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure. Like, if I were measuring the effectiveness of those, I'd have everyone sign up and I'd look at their previous 5 years tax returns. And then they'd authorize me to look at their next 5-year tax returns. And then I'd make data, driven statements about how effective the boot camps are. And I think what you would find is that you'd find a group of people that are really taking this to the next level and use it as a springboard. And then you'd find a group of other people that parents forced them to do this and they were going to take away their car and not support them anymore. After they graduate the boot camp, they're basically about where they started. So I think if you did some classification and some grouping, you'd find those interesting clusters. I also think that they're probably not going to do that, because in order to do that right, you'd also have to have a control group of people that you reject from your boot camp. They would have to be close enough to your cohort that you can make meaningful comparisons. But that's what I would like to see when people are talking about boot camps.
Yeah, I have in my experience seen economic development and government money spending be kind of allergic to science and metrics. So I don't support that, but it's just a trend that I've observed. So I think you're probably right that we won't see that.
It's called narrative-driven analysis, right? "Oh, here's the story of a success. Well, what about all the failures? What about all this is not statistically meaningful." Right?
Brian, you'll find if you look in the dictionary that the plural of anecdote is indeed data. I have my own take on that stuff. I do think it's interesting that kind of our company at that time and your company kind of took a very similar in terms of getting very nationwide, and we didn't necessarily abandon our Albuquerque roots. We still always hired there and things like that. But we got very spread out and very remote kind of before COVID, and then COVID just kind of poured fuel on that fire.
Well, what about your Spanish, right? Like, has that helped a lot? I mean, do you have any Spanish speaking developers that you're managing, or how's that work?
I don't work with anyone who speaks Spanish directly. I have worked with other developers for customers where we spoke Spanish together at work, which is a great way to learn Spanish, and you get paid for it. So no complaints there. But no, I'm super open to it. It's we tend to work on a lot of projects that people want US-based people who for compliance reasons, security reasons, and it is what it is. But I don't have any kind of bias against. I don't have any kind of bias against working with folks who are not US American based or fluent English speakers necessarily.
Well, we're talking about the bootcamp stuff too, Brian, and Justin, to your point about it being, I think the idea is sound. The company I used to work for like 100 years ago, so we'll call it another lifetime ago, I did training, and we actually did, before boot camp was really a thing, we kind of did basically what were boot camps. And this was in St. Louis, Missouri at the time. And we put this program together for companies that were having major layoffs at the time and who were needing to transition to new skill sets. They were, middle-aged or older. They were in a career that they had been in their whole lives. They didn't know anything else, but going through these different types of boot camps. And we had some that were very, very basic, getting you into computer systems, operating systems, software, just productivity sorts of things. But we also had this other bucket of people who were more technical and wanted to be more technical that were ultimately going to take routes like, Microsoft certification, Novell, Cisco, that sort of thing. And then Brian, I think that's where we started getting actually a lot of really good data as to those buckets that people fell into, because we could follow through with them. And that was actually part of the program. Was one, you had to get accepted into it. Granted, the bar was low, but we didn't take everybody. And then on the other side of it, there were also follow-ups that had to occur. And part of the end process was finding some level of work for these people as well, whether that was an internship or resume building or things along those lines. And it was always part of the program on the role of the instructors, which I was one of, to encourage people, as you say, to continue learning. This is quick, fast, and in a hurry. You're going to get enough stuff to kind of get your arms around a few things, get you in a door somewhere, but you're not going to know everything that you need to know to do this stuff. And so, the continued education, the continued learning is extremely important. But it was a good jumping off point.
Yeah, and that's how I view it. And I tend to be like, hey, here's what we need to do. Here's some tutorials. Here are 3 people you can ask questions to. Go. And the person has to figure it out, right? Because that's ultimately, I have a great theoretical base, but that's what I had to do. And if somebody's motivated and they want to figure something out, you can't stop them. You might be able to kill them, but you can't actually stop them, right? It's impossible. And just like if they're not motivated, it's almost impossible to motivate them. If you think about the extremes of this, it's just amazing what people can do with very limited resources if they're properly motivated versus the kind of resources that get squandered when they're not.
Yeah, Daniel always had kind of a pithy saying that it's a little tongue in cheek, but it's like, learn how to program in 10 years. As opposed to 8 weeks, right? Like that's the
so, that's a good one.
Admittedly, signups for our bootcamp were low, but I think
the state funding wasn't there either, right?
No, investments that take 10 years to pay off.
Sizable commitment. It was a sizable
commitment. No, that's good, right? It's like when Aristotle or Plato asked the oracle at Delphi, who's the wisest man in all of Greece? And they said, you. And he's like, no, I'm not wise. I don't know anything. And he realized that it was this search for knowledge and admitting that he had a lot to learn that made him wise. And say, oh, you're going to have all the answers in 8 weeks. Uh-oh. No, you're not. Yeah.
I think the other side of that learning or something also, like if you talk about like motivation and responsibility, like being a business owner with a technical consultancy, you don't have the ability to put your hands up and say, I don't know. You can admit you don't know the answer right now, but the buck kind of stops with you. So like an employee puts something on my desk, not so much so now since I'm basically just a talking head, but back when I had technical ability, people put something on my desk, I didn't have the option to be like, yeah, that's hard, I don't know. Have someone else deal with it, because it's like, well, if I don't solve it for the client, they're not going to want to pay their invoice, and I have to make payroll and jail time and those kinds of things. So I think that that can be a big motivator.
Yeah, I think so. I try to empower my people to always, search for an answer, and sometimes they don't exist. Occasionally, clients will ask you for things that require you to either predict the future or factor large numbers into their prime components or efficiently find a path among all the cities to deliver things. So, knowing like limitations is also good, but in a way that you can prove them. You can say, this is impossible and here's why, right? And if the person can't read and doesn't want to understand, you just do the best you can. But occasionally that does happen, and that's pretty interesting when it does, when you get asked to do, 6 impossible things before breakfast.
And then you're confident in your team that you can pull that off.
Yeah.
or maybe even half of them, right? I can only take care of 3 impossible things right now, but I'll put the other 3 on the back burner.
Is it hourly or is it a subscription-based impossible thing?
There you go. So
hourly impossible, we can work.
Hourly, if we can do it.
Yeah. So talking about your team, you said you're a team of 8 right now. We're as large as 11. What is your kind of approach to growth for the company? People, projects, products. How do you approach growing, or do you kind of just rely on the organic nature of it?
So my goal, right, is to focus more on a scalable product. Right now, I would say that we've productized a lot of our services so that we have these monthly support agreements where we get recurring revenue. We offer people a certain level of support. Right. And even for the hourly stuff where it flexes, they've committed to a minimum baseline. Right. And then for the other ones that, we don't have the flex, they've they've agreed to a ceiling, and we just hit the ceiling every month, right? So that is how we've turned, WordPress development, Django development, Java development into something that is like monthly recurring revenue. So that's what we've done. And I was really proud when I looked maybe 3-4 years ago. It was all project based, hourly, fixed price consulting. And it's hard because you just have to be selling nonstop. And if you can get this recurring revenue to flow in, you're like not hustling to make your payroll in the way that Justin joked about, but is ultimately true, right? Like that's like a problem with hourly consulting. So if you focus on these support agreements, if you focus on these larger fixed price deliverables that have monthly milestones, monthly deliverables, monthly commitments, and then every single one of our projects has a monthly component baked in. If we launch a WordPress site, there's a monthly component to manage it. If we launch a Django app, there's a monthly component to manage and to expand it, right? And people have the flexibility to go up and down unless they jerk me around and cancel and start and cancel and start. I let them cancel their monthly agreement. But when they do, the rate goes up, the availability goes down. If the person has a problem when they're not under support, I don't jump. Because like the whole reason of these support agreements is to proactively fix these problems before they become problems, right? If we do a good job and we're proactive and we're making this stuff better, we're not up at night when your crap breaks because nobody updated your dependencies in the last 4 years, right? Like that's like what I wanted. So that's what we're doing. What I want to do is take that to a scalable product, right? I want to build out products that can scale. So instead of doing a Java application, a Django application, WordPress stuff, custom plugins, this, that, and the other, a Python script to analyze a CSV file to push it into Tableau, random, whatever you need. If we just focus on one thing that scales, that we've found a pot of money and mined it, I think that should be easier, but it's harder to build that, right? Like we've tried and we failed about 3 or 4 times, right? And I realize I don't have the skills that are needed to do that by myself. So what am I doing? I'm working with people that have industry expertise. I'm working with different salespeople, different people that are skilled at those things in an attempt to do that. I'm also taking, equity deals. We have another client, Equiseq. They do horse genetic sequencing. We rebuilt their entire tech stack. They were running this custom PHP application, no MVC framework, nothing. Anytime they wanted to change a user model, they had to go in and add a new user permission and update the users. It was crazy. I mean, it was actually not bad for what it was, but it was done by someone that was very smart that had never used a framework, right? So we replaced the whole thing with Django for the genetic test management, and then WordPress for the marketing and the e-commerce, because that's a pretty good combination. We came up with a JWT sharing mechanism. So when they log into WordPress, Django recognizes that authentication token, and they don't have to log in again to Django. When a user is created in WordPress, a corresponding user is created in Django. So it's this cross login system. So people, normal humans, can log in and view their horse genetic test results. After they purchase it through WooCommerce and WordPress, they log in and then they can see. So it's a way to bind those things, because WordPress really isn't a good choice when you have like more than like 2 or 3 tables and more than like 1 or 2 foreign keys. You just don't want to do that. It gets messy real quick. And I gave them a discount. I like working with them, and we own a percentage of their company, because that kind of biotech thing, right? If it takes off with their 7 or 12 different genetic sequencing patents, right, and they get acquired by a big biotech company, that'll be our product, right? It's not enough to make, it's not FU money, but it would be like life-changing money. So I take more of those risks than I might be able to do otherwise, because I know I'm not going to build a horse genetic sequencing company. What I can do is help them with their website. I can help them with their database. I can help them with their business needs that they need. I can talk to them about, hey, let's get these genetic sequencing chips, and then we can just directly talk to the chip from the lab. Wouldn't that be cool to create these APIs that the chip can just upload the results to? Yeah, but we got to be running 1,000 tests a week before the chip manufacturers will talk to us. So it's a nice way in the interim to work towards that. But long term, like I don't see myself, and I have a lot of energy. But I don't think I can run a consultancy forever. It's exhausting. So I need to get a product. I need to scale this out, because we have the technical team, but we don't have the business expertise, the subject matter expertise. There are places that we're missing, and I'm trying to partner with that. So maybe I'm growing the consultancy a little bit slower because I'm focused on some of these other things, and they're working out okay. We're not losing money, but it's not like I am ready to gift you both wonderful Teslas or pick you up in my private jet yet.
Yeah, it feels like a very similar arc, consultancy into product and things like that. And I saw
I'm trying to think where exactly. It was either on your website or in your profile, but you had a statement about, products scale better than consulting and contracting, but they take longer. And I think that is an accurate statement.
Yeah, and they're riskier, right? So they take longer and there's way more risk. But I mean, you go for these hockey stick shaped growth curves that you see in every single ridiculous business presentation ever. But I mean, there's some reality to that. If you can do it, right? My team could manage. I mean, I've individually managed an application that had 15 million check-ins a day. I mean, it was very stressful upgrading it, but one guy, Andrew Stone from here in New Mexico, he built his millions on Twitterator, a Twitter aggregator app for the iPhones 15 years ago. One person can build a business that's life-changing. That's FU money, as one of my friends likes to say, because after that, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's for the uninitiated, that's an acronym for Freedom Unlimited.
Right.
Just so you know,
right.
Not to. Yeah, it's good to have freedom unlimited money.
Yeah, freedom unlimited money. Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, just wanted to help out for folks who don't know the industry
I try
jargon.
not to use acronyms.
Right.
Too much jargon.
But so I don't know, maybe this may be in the same vein or maybe it's a different vein, but I got was kind of doing some prep in advance of interviewing you. It's been a little while since we talked last, and seen a lot of stuff about drones and agriculture, and like you also have like a housing product. So man, what's going on with that stuff?
So both of those are some of the moves. We have an application that a nonprofit paid for us to build out called Roofs. And if you're a nonprofit and you're helping homeless people get into houses, they're at the tail end. I didn't used to know so much about homelessness, but you and I and everyone here is kind of at one spectrum where you own your own house and you're in a place and it's working out great. And then the other extreme is like, I'm on the streets and I'm using drugs, right? And between those 2 points, there are a lot of different gradations. And the one that we helped out with is, hey, I'm not addicted to drugs. I don't have mental health problems. I don't have, a bunch of problems with the criminal justice system. I just don't make enough to pay my rent. Right. So the city of Albuquerque and lots of places offer these permanent supportive housing vouchers. And for the permanent ones, the people are disabled. So, and they do work, or some, just not enough to pay their rent. So they can get a grant to not be homeless. But that grant requires a tremendous amount of paperwork. The nonprofit that's administering the grant has to inspect the house every year. They have to run income certifications on the person at least every year. They have to do all these things, and then they have to make sure that the lease has standard provisions in it. So it's not, above a certain amount or taking advantage, like all these things. So it's a lot of administrative work to administer these housing programs. And the federal government has guidelines, the state has guidelines, the county has guidelines, and the city has guidelines. So with our product, these housing coordinators were able to handle about 70 people a month. And without our product, the same job, same organization, the people were handling 30. So the executive director was like, hey, why is your department so much more efficient? And, our champion said, because you invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in the system and it's paying off now. He said, let's roll it out to the whole company and you're promoted. And that's what we did. The drone, that one was funded by a New Zealand rancher. In New Zealand, they get fined if the percentage of weeds gets above a certain point on their ranch. So the governments are very aggressive about pushing against invasive weeds. So we built a drone with a computer vision system that can fly around and identify a weed and spray it. But the prototype is really small, right? It's tiny. So it's got a little Raspberry Pi here. It's got a camera that's hanging off here because it's not really super well attached. And it's got 2 little tanks. So it's got maybe a liter and a half of load capacity, but it works. We need to take this thing up to 25 liters per acre in New Mexico and 50 liters an acre in New Zealand. So we need to build a way bigger drone. We want to make it so that it reloads too, that the batteries can get swapped out, that the poison can get topped off. And then I think this will be viable. Right now, it's a research project. We haven't even gotten to the sales part yet. The New Zealand rancher was backing it. He always crashed his drones. Everybody crashes their drone if you fly it with a joystick. We don't even have a joystick. We write a program to fly our drone, so we've never crashed it. So his drones were constantly crashed, constantly in service. So we're building a bigger drone. We've got to do that before we can actually sell this. I ran an AM radio ad, got a rancher in New Mexico interested. We went out to test. We're going to go out and test in the spring. We have to build a bigger drone. That's what's next there.
Very cool.
So those are some examples of like, I'm trying, right? And it's not like I lost money on the homeless application, or well, I may have lost money on the drone, but drones are pretty cool, but not very much, right? The drone is I think we're either slightly ahead or close to neutral. We're not even building the bigger drone. If it works, we'll do very well, because in New Mexico the ranch productivity just goes down and they lose cows. The guy can lose 100, 150, 200,000 a year if he loses 20, 25 cows, because if they're full, they're ready to give birth, they're big, it can be real bad. So there's a big problem there. It's just the labor shortages, like it's crazy. It's impossible to get people to work, in the sun, in these chem suits, spraying weeds 4 hours away from a city.
No doubt.
Seems like a task that's ripe for automation and for some mechanization. So
yeah, we'll see. We'll see if we can do it. I think we can. Yeah.
Seems like it's in the adjacent possible. I think I guess the image recognition stuff is probably, at least from the outside, that seems to be the hardest, because even though you're going to have a drone with a load, it's not a swinging load. It's not suspended. So you should be able to stabilize these things pretty well, because the weight's going to be somewhat consistent. And then as you get rid of fuel, or not fuel, but poison, that's going to deplete in a predictable way.
And the flight computers are really good about that. Like from our point of view, right? Like we're running on a general purpose processor, Raspberry Pi there, but it's integrating with the flight computer, and the flight computer takes instructions like fly to this point, right? At this speed. And that's it. Like we don't have to adjust the rotors based upon the decreased load, or, if the battery starts going low, it returns home. We don't have to increase, how much we're pulling because it's going less. Those flight controllers are really good. So from our perspective, the software thing that's been difficult has been, well, what about different lighting conditions? What about different plant life cycles? They look a lot different if they're blooming and they have a flower versus no flower versus kind of wilted and almost dead in the fall time. Like those are the types of tech issues that we've been dealing with. But even then, I own a software company and Oleg's super smart. Like there are solutions for that. The hard part for us has been the hardware. We're not hardware guys. So I'm partnering with a guy that is a hardware guy that's really interested. He's helpful, but he's got a different full-time job. He's not my hardware guy. He's a hardware guy that wants to help when he can, and he's doing great work, but we're slow on the hardware. And I need to build, and we have to build it. We can't buy it unless we get a massive amount of VC funding or some backing, because it's just going to be too expensive and it's going to be broken all the time. Like that's the thing. If you buy a commercial drone and you don't know how to fix it, you're just waiting. You're waiting for parts.
I'm super eager to follow up on this in a couple of years. Curious to see where this lands, because it's a super cool project.
It's fun. That's one of the reasons that I'm like, okay, I'm not super concerned that it's making me tons of money, because if it does, it'll be a home run, and if it doesn't, who cares? It's fun. We can build image recognition systems for anything now. Do you see Silicon Valley? Have you watched that show?
No.
Oh, you got to
yes.
see it.
Yeah,
it's
great.
super funny. The guy builds a hot dog recognition system for just hot dogs, and he sells it for like millions of dollars. And like that's kind of what we built for weeds, is a weed recognition system.
I think Snoop Dogg probably has one of those as well.
Yeah.
Cool. I really wanted to kind of when I thought about having you on, I really wanted to chat with you about the right kind of business who can benefit from working with a consultancy, when it's a good fit, when it's not a good fit, and then kind of like maybe I can riff with you a little bit on tips for folks who were thinking about working with a consultancy as to how to get like the most out of that partnership.
Yeah. So the one thing that I notice is customers that have just a very well-defined need. If they can say, here's what I've been doing in Excel, it's taking me and my people so much time. I know we can build a program for this. That's like my perfect customer. And we're talking with a law firm that's representing communities that have been hit by wildfires. And I never really realized it, but it makes sense that, after a fire goes through a northern New Mexico community, those community members can go for, federal FEMA money, or they used to be able to, right? So they can go after FEMA. They can get money from the state. They can get money from their insurance company. And if the fire is like liable, then they can go after whoever like started the fire, like the electrical company or the Forest Service if it's a controlled burn that went out of control. And there might be settlement funds. And all of these places have different rules for applying for money and timelines and distribution things and proof. And like the lawyer company is doing this for like 2,000 to 5,000 people. The fire goes through and burns Mora, northern New Mexico. There might be 5,000 homes that were impacted, and the ranch productivity might be down for a lot of them. So, pushing these different people through is taking them a long time, and they have the Excel spreadsheet of doom. So, when I'm talking to them and I'm working with them and I'm seeing these connections and I'm asking them if they have pivot tables and how it works, like they have pretty good requirements because it's something that they're doing by hand that they don't want to be doing by hand anymore. Right. So that's like my favorite is like, here's the business need. Here's the problem. Here's how I'm solving it inefficiently. Here's how I'd like a program to solve this. And I say, great, this sounds wonderful. Right. And that's pretty cool. Like the other one is like, here's what I'd like to do. Here's where I would like to go. I don't really know if there's a business need, but I'm willing to explore this. Right. And those guys are okay too. They're not, I don't like them quite as much as the first set, but it can be nice. And that's how that's how humans find new things is by messing around and trying and seeing if it works or not, even if it's, maybe it doesn't work, maybe it does work. Right. So that would be like number 2 of good. On the bad end, right, would be the person that has fired 3 different developers, right? Not consultancies, but individual developers that they thought they could work with, that they thought they could manage, right? And then they're telling me about all the cool tech stack things that they want to include. It needs to use AI and it needs to use Bitcoin. And I need this database because it can scale really well. And I'm like, what do you mean? You have like 5 half-done projects. Like none of this makes any sense. What are you talking about? And they're like, no, it has to be this way. And then I have to ask myself, do I want to take their money and like have a bad outcome because I need money, or do I want to walk away? Right. And the position that I need to be in is that I can always walk away, right? That I don't make these bad choices because I have bills to pay, right? Because that leads to like unhappy outcomes with bad people. And you can just see it right at the beginning, like when they're like, hey, you know what? I tried this, it didn't work. I think I'm ready to do it right. Right? What do you think? How would you approach this? And they say, here's what I tried. It didn't work. I think I need somebody that can think at a higher level, right? That's like the horrible guy that like had the epiphany and now is willing to be good, right? So, which occasionally happens. One of the clients that we handed to you, I think that sort of happened, maybe not completely, but it was a wake up and face Jesus moment when you don't fire the developers, but they fire you. And you have to look and you have to say, hey, why am I doing this? Like, what are the reasons? What do I want to accomplish? What are my goals? Not just something cool because I have money to spend, right? Like that's not good. So it's like working with you as a business partner to accomplish something.
Yes, exactly that. It's like if you know all the tech things you want and you're technically competent and all that, and you just need developer support, then hire a developer and work with that person. Hire a developer on contract. You don't pay guys like us because we can program. I mean, we can't even program anymore.
Not anymore. I've rusted. We've rusted. Yeah.
That's not our value add, is that I can put my fingers on a keyboard and make a Ruby app do something. I mean, I do occasionally do that, but we can talk to you about scalability when you need to care about it. You and I are both entrepreneurs. I can say, hey, why don't we get this in front of people as a clickable prototype, which costs no money? And you can see if anyone cares about this thing that you want to build. And we can do that for $10,000 instead of $100,000 for round 1. And having people work with you as a partner is like, that's where someone can work with a consultancy successfully.
Yeah. One of my clients gave me a good compliment. She said, Brian, you're always asking like, if this is going to move the needle, like what will be the benefit to my business if we do this? Right. And like a lot of developers, they just run the clock. Yes, sir, I'll do it. And it's like, if you don't ask those questions, you can, it's waste a ton of money and a ton of time. And what's even worse is just the opportunity. Like, why not help them be successful and be successful along the way? Because you're too busy doing what they told you, right? Like that's
because you're madly in love with writing code that no one ever uses. Yeah, and there's no benefit to anybody.
Because you made bad life choices and you have bills to pay, right? Unfortunately, that's oftentimes it. So just position yourself to be in a position where you don't have to take somebody's money if you don't think the outcome's going to be good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of the cool things as consultants we get to do is we get to push back on people and ask them if they've actually vetted out this idea. And
yeah, one of our clients really wanted to do an iOS app. No one was using the web app. No one. Like I was like, no, I mean, I think if this is it, if you're hearing we need better mobile responsivity, we need to change these views. I mean, let's invest more. The mobile view looks all right? We use Bootstrap. We set everything up. It's not bad, but it's kind of the default. So we can spend some time. We can make the mobile view better. We can improve this. without an iOS drop. And they said, yeah, let's do it. And I mean, I feel like on the one hand, I could have drugged them out for another 4 or 6 months of development work at a higher rate. But on the other hand, I feel like, those are the kinds of things that strengthen that partnership. You gain trust when people say, here's the right thing to do, not here's the easy thing to do, or here's what would be right for me and wrong for you, right? That erodes trust.
Yeah, helping that perspective, like just from the outset, we talk ourselves out of as much business as we talk ourselves into it, because sometimes the solution already exists. Sometimes there is something that's better, easier, faster than what you're doing, and it doesn't necessarily need to be built. But at the same time, if it does need to be built, and you're already coming in the door with, no, this has, like you said, has to be on iOS, has to leverage AI. It's like, well, why? What's the goal?
Yeah, it's also like, this is a very expensive way to find product market fit.
Yeah, right.
The reason that nobody wants to use your app is probably not because we wrote it in Angular instead of React. Maybe, but you probably we can't apply technical solutions to business problems. We can solve business problems with tech, but the tech itself is not a solution, or the tech itself is not a solution to a business problem. We have to apply technology in a way that solves a business problem that's actually a real problem. And if no one cares about your product, it's probably not because of the tech. Probably.
Yeah, I always joke around with one of my buddies at Google that a lot of people that lack religion, they find it in things like specific algorithms such as blockchain or AI, and they have a religious experience when it comes to choosing the proper data structure or solution that has nothing to do with reality, and it's based on their religious beliefs. And he laughs. So, it's just joking around.
I mean, everybody uses the Xfinity website, and I'm here to tell you that is not a pleasure. Not a pleasure in any way, shape, or form. So, but we need something that it does, so we use it, right? So put your business in the same position and then hire us to build it so it doesn't suck as bad as the Xfinity website. So I'll give you a chance to plug some stuff for you, Brian.
Yeah. So, I mean, if anyone needs help with custom application, custom database, custom reporting, or if they have a WordPress site they want to take to the next level, those are our two main lines of business. We're here for a long time, so there's always a subscription component, right? That's part of what we do, just to make sure that it makes sense long term. So, hit me up if you need any development efforts, or if you want a drone-based computer vision system to do something awesome. That would be really fun. So those are the kind of things that I'd love to help with and get some more business on.
What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can call me, 505-750-1169. People can email brian@noventum.us, or they can go to our website, noventum.us, and submit a contact request. So those are kind of the three ways that are normal. And people can always come by my office and bring some donuts if they're in Albuquerque, but with the international and national level of business, that one's a little bit more rough. But I'm around.
So if you need a WordPress site or some technical consulting help, or you're a farmer who struggles with weeds, Brian's your guy.
Yeah, those are. Or if you need some new tires, or you need a test, or you want to buy some Amway. No, I'm just joking about that. That's sometimes what I feel like for the tech equivalent. Just these wildly different offerings.
Well, thanks for joining us for another fun-filled episode of SaaS That App. Thanks to Aaron for co-hosting with me. Brian, thanks for coming on. And
yeah, thanks, guys. I had a fun time. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thanks for cruising along with us on SaaS That App. We hope you grabbed some insights that were inspiring, actionable, or at least entertaining.
If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.
Until next time, keep building, keep growing, and keep those apps sassy.